Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Easy Conversations, a podcast about having easy conversations. I'm your host, Furkhan Dandia. In this week's episode, I sit down with an old friend of mine from high school, Jordan Larocque. Jordan shares his story of being part of a Francophone indie pop band, Bonjour Brumaire. Jordan was a professional musician for over 10 years, and he went on many, many tours and played a lot of gigs. However, going on tours forced Jordan to miss time with friends and family and started impacting his mental health, which ultimately led him to leave the band and focus on his career. I hope you can get a deeper perspective on the life of a musician or any artist for that matter and understand the mental health challenges that come with those careers. It was definitely eye opening for me. If at the end of the episode you can leave a review, I would be truly grateful. Let's get right into it.
Good to see you. Let's get this podcast started. We've been talking about it for a while, so I'm super happy you're here and grateful for you to take the time and do this. So thanks.
Thanks, man. I'm happy to be on the show. It's really cool.
All right, cool. All right, so we'll just get started. I guess for people that don't know you or the listeners, yeah,
Yeah,
just let us know a little bit about yourself.
sure, man. So my name's Jordan Larocque. I'm 37 from Montreal, Quebec. Professionally, I'm what they call an instructional designer, which basically means I'm a guru of sorts in terms of pedagogical information and strategy. Um, if I were to really dumb it down, I basically teach teachers how to teach and sort of render content for it to be online.
Yeah,
Um, Former musician. Yeah, man. It's basically
cool.
proud father of a young boy.
Nice. No, that's exciting. So we're gonna touch on all of that. So
Yeah.
it's great you mention it. So I guess with what you do for your profession, you must be really busy right now, especially with online schooling.
Yeah, it's been absolutely unreal since I would say last March, since COVID not happened. I mean, it's been unreal. Like words can't describe
Yeah,
the types of
yeah.
experiences we've had on our end.
No, that's yeah. I mean, it's been a different world for sure.
Yeah.
I guess, and you work at McGill,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
So I work for a department called ISET, which is Instructional Services and Educational Technologies, which I guess is a fancy way of just saying the e-learning department.
yeah, yeah. No, that's fair.
And yeah, no, and it's yeah, I've been there for about 3 years. Yeah, it's gonna be 3 years, I think, in about a month. So it's been a
Cool.
while. Yeah,
Yeah. No,
yeah.
I'm a proud McGill alumni. So
Are you sure she went to McGill?
yes, yeah. I did my
Ah, I didn't even
engineering
know.
there. Yeah,
That's
yeah,
amazing, amazing.
yeah.
It's great school, great school.
Yeah, for sure. So I
Definitely.
guess right now with obviously the campuses are closed, res, from what I hear, not a lot of people even staying in res or even the nearby buildings or apartments. So
Yeah,
what's the plan like? We haven't been hearing much in terms of
yeah.
what's the plan to kick off the semesters in person. Obviously, the fall semester for most universities was online, but going into
Yeah.
winter, what's the news?
Well, so I mean, it's hard to say because I mean, we're kind of at a standstill, kind of like the rest of the world, right? Because we're best way I could describe it is like the typical project manager approach, where you kind of plan 3 months out, see how things go, and then readjust if need be, right? So right now, I think they have a set of contingencies up for students that are actually wanting to attend class in person, as well as staff, where you have like mandatory health checks for people that absolutely need to be on campus. In terms of class sizes that are actually happening in person, obviously it's reduced numbers. They're putting measures in place for social distancing, but be honest with you, man. I mean, for winter, the upcoming semester, I mean, that's just going to be remote instruction, which I think is an important distinction between what we call remote and online instruction.
Yeah,
Um, and basically, like remote instruction is, kind of like the experience that you and I are like having right now, where like you could be like on a teleconferencing app or like Zoom or Skype or something, and you're having a formal conversation with somebody, having an exchange of knowledge, and you move through the learning process that way. But um, I would say probably the large majority of what's going to be occurring is going to be in that type of a format. Um, and when you have courses that are offered that are online, those are a bit more different. Those are
Yep.
courses that are much more labor intensive. You take a lot more time to develop. Yeah, man. I mean, they're more complete experiences from end to end where, there's a lot of thought that goes into like, engagement and participation and that sort of a thing and getting people involved in the actual experience of their
Yep.
education. So, yeah, I mean, I think at McGill right now, what's going on is we're just basically trying to do the best with what it is that we have while we can,
For sure.
um, but yeah, no, I still think it's like I said, right now it's such a moving target that I mean, things change from day to day. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. No, and I guess if I was a student, I would have two questions, which I am, but my program's online anyways. But um, the two
You're
questions I would
lucky.
have, yeah, for sure. But I guess what I would be curious to know is when should I expect to be back in school in person, which again is a moving target, which like you said,
Yeah.
makes sense. The other piece is if I'm paying full tuition, I'm not getting full value for my education.
Aha. Yeah, no, that's a fair point. I know there's a lot of students out there that feel that way. And if I were to, place myself back in my shoes when I was, in grad school and doing online programs, I kind of had that type of an attitude as well, or not an attitude, but an outlook as well,
Yeah,
with respect to those types of learning experiences. But um, having worked in the field for in quite a few years. I mean, I used to work in corporate training before this as
yeah,
well, and yeah, I mean, there's a lot of effort and support and time that goes into putting these courses online and having prepping teachers even for remote instruction. So
yeah,
um, so what I think what I'm getting at is there's actually a lot of costs associated to these courses in the short run, where I think in terms of instructional value, there's certainly an argument to be made on the students front for remote experiences where, they're less tailored. But from the administrative standpoint and cost perspective on the universities side of things, I mean, sometimes the actual cost of developing these courses can be 3 to 4 times as much as having something that can be instructor led. So it's one of the key bits of information, or that I mean that I can offer to people that a lot of people just don't really realize sometimes. I mean, a
yeah,
lot of people have the impression that when you're developing an online program, it's basically just take your PowerPoints and then you just stick them in a computer
yeah,
and you just click play or
yeah,
something like that.
yeah, yeah.
Uh, but there's a lot more work involved in that sort of thing to tailor stuff for a different environment.
For sure. No, and I can appreciate that. I guess I mean,
Yeah,
there's pros and cons to both approaches in terms of receiving your education. And we could sit here and debate that all night. But
for sure,
yeah,
for sure.
yeah, probably not a lot of value in that. But you did touch on another thing.
Yeah,
Former musician.
yeah.
So
Long time ago.
so yeah, like what was that like, and what brought you to where you are today?
It's crazy, man. How long do you have?
Just the
Yeah,
Coles notes, yeah,
just the cold notes. All right,
yeah,
so I'll give you the high
yeah,
level sort of a spiel, if you will. So, yeah, no, I mean, started out when I was a teenager. Needed a how can I say this? A means of expressing myself. Just a way to get things out.
yeah,
The typical uh, teenage angst, I guess,
yeah,
trying to find yourself.
yeah,
And yeah, started a few bands, and things got a bit serious later on down the road. Did a lot of touring. I toured with a lot of big name acts like Good Charlotte and Newfound Glory back in the early 2000s. Like pretty much any like alternative punk band that was around. I mean, I played at Osheaga 3 times. I played Warp Tour. I did everything, man. And yeah, and basically one of the last projects that I ended up on, um, which ended up being pretty successful, was this Franco pop band that I was in called Bonjour Brumaire. We actually were the first band that there's a known artist in Quebec. Her name's Card de Pirate. So she played keyboard for us, and we're kind of what catapulted her into like her fame that she has right now. Well, not catapulted, but we were basically her first
yeah,
her first shot at it. And yeah, no, man, it was nuts. It's the type of thing where we just did a lot of tours, sold somewhere between like, I think like 15,000 albums. And I mean, which was a big deal because I mean, back
Yeah.
then this was pre Spotify, pre
Yeah.
internet. So people actually still had to go out and buy physical
Yeah.
music at a store.
For sure.
No, but it was crazy. I got to learn a lot of things about myself as well. Um, I mean, it's the type of thing where it's got its benefits. It's also got a lot of hardships. Just living on the road. A lot of musicians, they say that you know being in a touring band is kind of like being it's like finding the fountain of youth, if you will. And I'd always heard that, as I progressed through like my years in music, because I mean, that was basically like from 18 to like 30. And then when I was 30, I said, I'm done for
Yeah.
a lot of reasons. But yeah. And the reason why they say that it's the fountain of youth is you kind of like, as you tour, you exist and you watch the world evolve around you while you don't. The only thing that you evolve in is your act and your music, which is kind of strange. You know what I mean? So like, I remember like I became an uncle for the first time when I was 25, I
Yeah.
think, you know what I mean? And like, I got to see like my sister go through like marriage, having a kid, having another kid, and then, and then like having a house and all this sort of like
Yeah.
stuff that I think a lot of people take for granted. Meanwhile, I was living in a van, touring, playing in front of a lot of people every night, which was incredible.
Yeah.
But you still have this feeling where you're just like, Jesus Christ, like life's passing you by, kind of,
Yeah.
Yeah, it was crazy, man. You learn a lot about yourself in those instances, though.
And you
So,
feel like you're missing out on stuff, friends and family,
yeah, man,
while
yeah,
you're
and I mean
gone.
that's a big reason why I ended up throwing in the towel, right? And I mean, I'd sacrificed a bunch of stuff, and I know some of it sounds like trivial, but like for example, the woman I married, like I had like a huge crush on her for years, and I never
Yeah.
like made a move because I was like, I live in a van, you know what
Yeah.
I mean?
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
And you just pass stuff up. I remember right before I threw in the towel having a conversation with one of my bandmates who actually that I went to high school with, and we'd been playing together for years, like 15 years. And I just had like a meltdown, right? Like a couple days before I said I'm done, and I walked away. And it was it was such a strange thing. It was one of my friends inviting me to go watch WrestleMania of all things. You
Yeah.
know what I mean?
Which is
And
very
just
important. Yeah.
it is. It is. It is. But just those simple little things where it's just like, God damn it. Like I missed Thanksgiving that year. I
Yeah.
missed birthdays. I missed everything. And then WrestleMania is what set me off the edge. You
Yeah.
know what I mean?
Well, sometimes that's all it takes, right? So,
Yeah.
so how many
Yeah.
tours, like just roughly on average per year, were you doing? Like just a rough number.
It depends on the project. I'd say like once I'd gotten signed to a label, we were touring honestly at least like I'd say somewhere between like 8 to 10 tours a year, and like those were usually about like 1 to 2 month spreads, so like we'd be out and gone for a while.
Yeah.
And again, this is before like the current modern
Yep.
technology era. We still had flip phones, you know what I mean? I
Yeah.
remember
Yeah.
getting my first Motorola Razor, and I was like, this is the most high-tech thing I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, no, we used to tour a lot. Spent a lot of time on the road, man. But
And were you touring in Canada primarily, or was it North
yeah, so
America? Yeah.
a lot, all over the place, man. We did a lot of touring in Canada. We did Europe. We also did the US, played South by Southwest. We ended up pretty much all over the place, surprisingly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess basically all in all, in my collective 10 years, like you name it, I've played there.
Okay. Cool. Cool.
Yeah, which is pretty cool. It's kind of like one of those stories where you feel like a seasoned warrior, but like at the end of the day, you get so close, but still like 10 years later, nobody knows your name, even though
Yeah.
you used to sign autographs and do stuff like that. It's a
Yeah.
weird thing, man.
Well, your name does show up on Wikipedia. I checked.
It does. It
Yeah.
does.
So there is some credit there.
It
Uh,
does. It does. But it's good memories that I can always look back on and tell my son about one day. Like I still kept all my laminates and stuff like that. It's like keepsakes and
cool.
but
Yeah.
yeah, I don't regret it. I don't regret it for sure. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's crazy.
But you did mention you had a meltdown.
I
So
did.
what was that? Was that just the pressure of performing, the touring, missing out on stuff, or a
Yeah.
combination of everything?
It's a complex question, man. I think that goes into a lot of like how can I say this? And this might be an interesting like let's see where this conversation goes. Like how can I put this? I think mental health was behind a lot of that. So as I was touring in my last couple of years, I was finishing up my first degree that I was doing at Concordia, and I was doing that mostly online, um, which ironically ended up working in e-learning 10 years
Hmm.
later. Go figure, right?
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, and like so, I'd play at venues like Club Soda, for example, in Montreal. For those of you guys who don't know where that is, it's a pretty decent sized venue. You can pack about like I'd say a couple thousand people in there, and we played to like sold out nights. And then
Yeah.
I'd go on, I'd play my set, I'd go backstage, lock myself in the closet, and I'd hit the books. It was the craziest thing ever. So it was a lot of pressure. And once I graduated, um, yeah, it was just a lot of sort of like me being at a crossroads where I was like 20, 28, 29, like towards the end. And I was like I said, I was watching my friends go light years ahead of me, even though I had all of this stuff. To me, I just wanted this sense of normalcy.
Hmm.
um and I didn't understand why I couldn't get that, even though I had put my heart and my soul into doing like a specific craft for so long, which I mean was fruitful at the end of the day. But it was just a lot of pressure, especially just having to drop everything in the whim of a dime.
Hmm.
um and just the people, man. I mean, you meet some amazing people, but you also meet some incredibly terrible people.
Yeah. Yeah.
um and like for example, I mean, like just the corporate aspect. I mean, everybody that is around you in your entourage, they're there to kind of make a buck off you, even though you're willingly paying them to do your job, basically. But I mean, I remember, like, we made a stupid amount of money in like one quarter, and I saw like a three-figure check, even though we made like something like five figures that should have been split by like five.
Yeah.
We saw a couple $100,
Yeah.
because you got to pay your lawyers, you got to pay your booking agent, you got to pay your touring agent, you got to pay the sound guy, you got to pay the hotels, you got to pay the
Yeah.
gas, you got to pay the car, you got to pay the strings, everything.
Yeah.
um, and then at the end of the day, it's like you're just kind of paying for your life on the road, you know what I mean? But there's nothing left for you to actually build a life. um,
Right.
which is I think a big factor as to why it is that I snapped towards the end. And yeah, and and I snapped in dramatic fashion too.
Okay.
Yeah,
Well, we'll definitely get to that.
yeah, it's pretty sweet.
So what, I guess looking at it, so,
Yeah,
most people, you look at a musician, you're like, okay, well, fine, they're making good money.
yeah.
Um, so what motivated you to do school in parallel?
Yeah. So what motivated me to do that? I mean, I think I had some good role models in my life. One of my bandmates was actually, like, the guy was brilliant, and I have to give him a lot of credit for where it is that I got in school. Like easily the most brilliant person I think I've ever met.
Yeah.
And he actually helped me along the way. Like just to get like in terms of the actual effort, like this guy was like, he wouldn't even have to try basically, and he just ace his courses. And I remember he
Yeah.
got into like NYU and stuff like that, like
Yeah.
just on a cinch. So I was
Yeah.
really grateful and lucky to have him around as a a, a, a motivating factor, and somebody that coached me through what it is that I needed to do to get myself to a different stage in life.
Yeah.
And I also had a sister who, basically had what, most people would call like a picture perfect life. You know what I mean? She had the big house, she had, was married, had two
Mhm.
kids, had her whole life together from a young age. pretty much polar opposite for me, where I was kind of a train wreck between 20 and 30. So,
Yeah.
so it helped me sort of find a path at some point, So, yeah, I think there's a saying about surrounding yourself with people. I'm at a loss right now, so I can't really remember what it is, but basically, I mean, if you keep good company, I mean, it'll reflect on you in the ways it is that you perceive it.
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it's all about energy, man. It
Yeah.
really is.
Yeah, no, and I
Yeah,
talk about that a lot too. And even in one of my podcasts, just again,
yeah,
surrounding yourself with the right people, right? And
yeah,
having that positive vibe.
yeah,
So I guess while you were doing this, especially
yeah,
in your early 20s, did you
yeah.
see it as your forever? Like, because otherwise you wouldn't have done school, right? Or was it like, okay, no, I'm going to do school, so at least I have
Yeah.
something else to fall back on, or no, I'm going to get an education and that'll be my longer term plan.
No, honestly, man, I kind of winged it. And what I mean by that is, I mean, so like I would say from probably about like 18 to like 24, 25, I was like, I'm just going to give it my all. I was like, I know that, it's a hard goal to achieve, but the more I work at it, I was convinced that I could get somewhere with it.
Hmm.
But the older that I got, and I mean, to go back to sort of what I was saying before, the more that I started to see, everyone else, in my opinion, move past where it is that I was in life, I started to worry. You know what I mean? And because of that, it wasn't necessarily a plan. It was more like of a reaction, where I
Hmm.
just kind of told myself, you got to do something,
Yeah, yeah,
um, and that's what I basically did. I just started studying a random program that I got onto, which was history, which I'm very grateful for, because if I hadn't have done that, I wouldn't be where I am today.
yeah,
Um, and I remember a lot of people kind of, just completely shitting on the idea, just saying, what are you going to do with a history degree? What are you going to do, like with this whole music thing that you're doing,
yeah,
like some people that asked me some hard questions, when really all I was doing in my mind was just giving up my all and putting my heart into everything it was that I was doing every time I go to
yep,
band practice, or every time I'd open a book, so for me, it started out as a contingency plan, but a weird thing happened at some point, is towards the end of my education, I actually started to really like education.
yeah, yeah,
Because before that, I never did. I mean, I
yeah,
was always an underachiever in school. Like I graduated CJEP, and for those of you who are listening right now who don't know what CJEP is kind of like, I guess, like senior high school, I guess, in the rest of
yeah,
Canada.
yeah. It's two
Um,
years post high school,
yeah, exactly.
but you save a year in university.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah,
Um, and it's this kind of weird void that exists in Quebec, where a lot of people just kind of get sucked into, and some of them make it out, and most of them don't.
yeah, yeah. I think it's more
uh,
of a filter of the ones
yeah,
that are going to go to university for sure.
yeah, totally, totally,
Yeah,
man. And yeah, all that to say, I mean, I graduated. It took me like 4 years to graduate from a 2-year program, and I had a failing average when I graduated.
yeah,
So it was cool to sort of see myself, you know what I mean, like kind of rise from the ashes, if you will.
yeah.
Sort of be so dramatic in terms of my academic success. So it was a monumental achievement for me, but it was a strange transformation at the same time, because it's like kind of like, as like one passion of mine just like died over time, another passion sort of grew out of that, so
Yeah, yeah, it's just
kind
that
of poetic.
you were evolving, right? Basically, and we all kind of go through that experience, but in different ways.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah,
the other thing you mentioned was the people you were surrounded by. So a lot of people,
yeah,
some, and they're obviously being your friends, and I say that quote unquote, but
yeah,
they're there really to make money off of you. And how do you know who's being genuine and authentic and
yeah,
who's not? And you
yeah.
mentioned there's some terrible people there,
Yes.
especially when
Yeah.
you're at that age. It's easy to fall prey, right? Potentially.
Very. Yeah.
So what's your advice to people who are kind of going through those motions now in their lives, or are struggling with that, and how to navigate through that?
That's a really good question, man. What would be my advice? So, like, I'm all for following your passion and your dreams, and and going the distance. I mean, I've done it
Yeah.
myself, and like I said, I have no regrets. But that being said, I think there's a fine line between going the distance and practicing your craft, and doing something that's going to get you into hot water because you're trying to get to that goal, no matter what the cost is.
Yeah.
Um, I think that patience is key to anybody out there. Um, and yeah, and basically, trust your instincts. I mean, that's really what it is. I remember, towards the end, and I won't name any names because I don't want to get sued. Um,
Okay. Fair enough.
just in case.
Yeah.
I remember being uh, in a meeting with a bank, which I won't name any banks,
Yeah.
to get some type of financial compensation for the group that I was with.
Yeah.
And basically the entire, like, it was like codified language, basically. Cause I mean, here I am, I was like some 26-year-old kid, even though 26 isn't a kid, but I mean, back then, I mean, as you're a musician, let's face it, you're
Yeah.
still a kid. You're
Yeah.
not an adult.
No.
Not even close.
No.
And yeah, and basically what it was is they were just basically trying to take a loan out against my name and have myself be personally responsible for, it was something like $30,000 worth of debt, just in case,
Yeah.
like, just as like basically, if the company that we had put together, under our band, had dissolved, I would have been personally responsible for all the debt.
Hmm.
So, but obviously that was it's kind of like conflicting, because you have kind of like the devil and the angel on your shoulder.
Yeah.
Because I mean, there's a justified reason to get that type of funding, but at the same time, you're just kind of like, well, do I listen to my sensible self or my optimistic self that just wants to go the distance and reach my goal?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think there's a lot of, how can I say, similarities between, my experiences in the musician space and in like professional life. It's the same type of thing where it's a game of chess.
Yep.
You're going to meet great people along the way that are going to be able to support you and help you, that are genuine, and you're going to meet people that are going to be there just because they want a leg up,
Yep.
somehow. So basically, you just got to keep your guard up, and yeah, and be patient. Be patient and trust your instincts. That's really what is at the end of the day. Like, if you got a sinking feeling that there's something that's off,
Yeah.
run.
Yeah. Yeah. Listen to your gut.
Basically. Yeah. It's that simple, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that whole meltdown then in the end,
Yeah.
what was it like? Were you,
Yeah.
you said there was huge mental health aspect.
Huge.
So, you don't have to like, I mean,
No,
as a musician, like, was there alcohols, drugs involved? Like,
yes.
did
Yeah.
that contribute to it? What did you feel like? Did you
Yeah.
know something was wrong, or you just felt like, no, this is what being a musician feels like, and that's
Yeah.
acceptable?
So I'll tell you exactly what happened, man. I played at a festival in Montreal, which they have every year for Francophone music. It's called Francophonie. We played the main stage that year, and there's like 20,000 people there.
Yeah.
And we played a set. We, did great. Everyone loved it. And I didn't feel anything anymore. It was dead.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons why I fell in love with music in the first place, is like when you play like a live show, you get a rush. It's just, you feed off the crowd. There's just so much energy there that, it bounces off the crowd, comes back to you, and you just get like this feeling of like, you're just bigger than anything. Yeah. And I didn't feel nothing anymore. And then I just started thinking about, why is it that I'm, I like, how, like, I basically took a few minutes by myself, and I just realized I just didn't love it anymore.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's complex question because I mean it's a multivariate response. I mean there's um, a lot of different factors, one of which would be, I mean, you'd mentioned like alcohol and addiction, and I mean there's a lot of that I was surrounded with. Um, I veered on the edge often. I never
Yeah.
quite fell into the abyss, but I certainly dabbled.
Yeah.
Um, I remember, and again, I won't name names because I mean, this person is still near and dear to my heart
Yeah.
regardless. And I think that they're in a better place now, which is great. But I often had to babysit somebody who was a recovering alcoholic, who would consistently relapse.
Yeah.
And there's some tremendously hilarious stories and some tremendously tragic stories that came out of that. But yeah, and I mean, it was tough, man, because especially just having to sort of keep your own sanity and keep your emotions in check and your mental health as well, while trying to maintain the same for some of your other colleagues that you have
Yeah.
around you, that just need way more help right off the bat that you can't possibly provide.
Mm.
And yeah, it just basically got worse and worse over time, and yeah, and it was too much to handle at some point. And yeah, basically, it was more of a decision where I kind of saw myself, and I said, if I continue that down this road, I was like, by the time I'm 40, I know where I'm going to end up,
Yeah.
and that's not the guy I want to be.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's fair.
Yeah,
Yeah. And
yeah,
like people like myself on the other end, we are often quick to jump to conclusions saying, hey, this guy's famous, he's doing so well. What does he have to complain about? Right. And
yeah,
and we don't factor in the mental health challenges. We don't talk about it as much. Did you
yeah.
feel like you had an avenue to voice some of your concerns, or do you feel like there was support provided to you guys, or it was just kind of like go do your thing and just make the money?
No, it was in my experience, I mean, we were really just treated as kind of a meal ticket.
Yeah.
So it was really just go out there, you should be grateful that, we've given you a record contract and that, you're on TV and you're on the radio and you got music videos out, and make money basically. That's there's no real regard for that. And I remember when I left, the band didn't survive much longer without me for reasons unknown, because I mean,
Yeah.
I didn't keep touch with them and vice versa, unfortunately. But yeah, I mean, it's the type of thing where I was replaced really quick. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So it's in that instance, I realized that like sort of like my labor of love, like the thing that I worked at so hard kind of got bigger than I was, you know what I
Hmm.
mean? And that just became its own machine that needed to function regardless of who's in there.
Yeah.
So it turns into a job,
Yeah. Yeah.
No, yeah, no. And unfortunately, yeah, nobody cares. Nobody really checks. Yeah. And I mean, like, I think that was a real eye-opening instance for myself, as well as like, like people in the media and musicians especially. Like I think musicians have a stigma of of just being like having stints with addiction and just people that
Yep.
just abuse alcohol. But I mean, there's legitimate reasons behind that. I mean, it's depressing when you're literally on the road for an entire year and you don't
Yeah.
see anyone. Like parties are fun, for example, like backstage parties, like for about a month, and then it just becomes commonplace and it's not a party anymore. It's just you just trying to stave off boredom and depression. And yeah, you can go to a really dark place really, really, really quick.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Well, no,
Yeah,
thanks for sharing that. And I guess knowing what you know today, do you
yeah.
think you could go back and do things differently and maybe even stay in the business potentially? Or you
Um,
feel like it was just you had put in your time and that was the time to leave?
that's a good question, man. I think it was my time, and the reason why I say that is, I'm in a good place now. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, I mean, I got my wife, who's a woman that I love dearly, that stood by my side no matter what,
Yeah.
since the beginning, and I got my son that I wouldn't change for the world.
Yeah.
if I could have done anything differently, sure, I would have maybe considered it. I'm not so sure the outcome would have been any different though in the long run. Um, some advice that I give to like musicians out there is, I mean, do it if you feel the need to, and but the most important thing is you just got to know when to throw in the towel.
Hmm.
Um, because I mean, at some point, unless you're the Rolling Stones, or unless you're, I don't know, Bon Jovi or something,
Yeah.
the well's going to dry up.
Yeah.
And that usually happens somewhere close to your 30s.
Yeah.
So give it a shot. And I mean, like, I don't know, if I were to give advice to like any young musicians out there, I mean, go the distance, follow your dreams, do what you got to do, just be safe about it, and have a backup plan, man. Have a plan, because you never know what's going to happen. I mean, what's hot, 2 years ago is not going to be the same thing in 5 years from now.
Right.
As soon as you hit the top, there's nowhere to go but down. So,
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's great advice, and I'm sure people will value that. But so you're here now. You've got a kid. How old is he now?
he's just turned 1.5, actually.
Okay, so how's it been like with COVID and stuff, I
Yeah,
mean, I can imagine it must be good to be home with your kid, but there's other
yeah,
challenges that come up with that too, right?
yeah, man. Well, I mean, you got a kid too yourself, right, Furkan?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. So it's. I mean, it's been crazy since the beginning. I mean, he was only, I'm gonna say, 3 or 4 months old when all of this stuff happened. Um, or started to happen anyway. And I remember last February where, I don't know what it was, but I just had this like sinking feeling in my gut that this was going to go foul.
yeah,
And I remember my wife thought it was crazy. I would come home from work and I'd get in the car and I drove to every Walmart within like a 50-kilometer radius. And I was just bulk buying baby formula.
yeah,
Because I was like, I don't know what's going to happen. Like,
yeah,
like, I don't know. I don't like, what if this is the apocalypse,
yeah,
So,
yeah,
so I had to amass like a year's worth of like food for my kid, which is like bare basics. Like, I was buying like, like 8-month old, like, snacks and stuff like that, even though he was like, 4 months away from that, just
yeah,
in case. I still have a pantry full of stuff that he hasn't eaten yet.
yeah,
It's been nuts though, man. I like, especially just the whole having to be isolated. And I know I'm not the only parent with a young infant out there going through this right now in Canada, but yeah, it's been tough for him not seeing his parents, not his grandparents, and the rest of his family. I mean, I think that there's been an impact on him, but he seems to be doing a lot better in
yeah,
terms of socialization. Um, like, for example, like, I mean, he had a lot of difficulties around people that he didn't know when he wasn't comfortable with. So, like, he was terrified of my sister for months. Like, he would just see her at like, the foot of the driveway when she'd do a COVID drive-by,
yeah,
and he'd just start screaming, for no reason, just because he didn't know the person and he was
yeah,
just used to mom and dad. So,
yeah,
um, but I mean, he's making strides and it's getting better. I mean, we've started doing the daycare thing, which is nerve wracking, but no, it's been a wild ride, man.
yeah.
It's been an
Well,
absolutely wild ride.
and that's interesting because I never thought of it from a baby's perspective because we do expose our babies to family and friends and they get used to that, but not
Yeah,
having that opportunity, I can't even imagine for them to see new faces.
yeah. It was a really, really, really tough challenge for us. Like, even we'd go to the park and he would just start, wailing,
Yeah,
just because we were stuck in a house for so long,
yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he's just not to, try and echo Joe Rogan, but he was born at a very, very strange time.
Yeah. And I mean, yeah, who knows how long this is going to last, but I look at my kid and it's the
Yeah,
same thing. It's going to be probably the biggest thing that's going to happen in his lifetime and he'll remember it, right, growing up. So it'll
yeah,
definitely
yeah,
be interesting for kids as they,
or the next generation. But
For sure, man. How old's your little guy, Furkan?
he's 7.5, so he talks about
Okay.
life before COVID and life after COVID. So yeah, he's
Okay.
got this
He gets it.
distinct line stitched in his life. Yeah,
Yeah. Oh,
but
that's he'll be okay though.
yeah, yeah, yeah. We'll all survive and get through this.
Yeah, yeah.
But you did mention, I think it was fairly recent, maybe a month ago when we were chatting, that your little guy was sick and you had to go to the hospital. And how was that?
Yeah.
How was that? Nerve-wracking? And yeah, like
Terrifying, man.
yeah,
Yeah, like so basically, I mean, he started daycare in, I'm gonna say, mid-August. And I mean, typical sort of a daycare scenario where, he's sick every other week. And then lo and behold, I mean, kid starts having a fever and we're like, okay, well, we'll try and ride it out, give him Tylenol, keep him comfortable, that sort of thing. And then like a couple days go by, he's still got a fever that just won't go down. So we're like, okay, this is a little weird. And then 5 days later, he's still got a fever. We're like, okay, what the fuck? And then we start seeing like rashes coming out like on his legs and like his torso. And we're like, oh, okay, this is normal. So it's like, let's take him to the hospital.
yeah,
So we ended up going to the children's downtown in Montreal. And, it's like a weird sort of a thing you'd see out of like a Contagion movie or something,
yeah,
where, everyone's behind plexiglass and they're all in PPE and, poor kid's like already traumatized by the world that he's grown up in his first year of life. And and we're just chilling out in the waiting room for about like, like probably about like 2 hours. I'm in like a plexiglass box basically in the waiting room. And then, they do a few poking and proddings. We both had to do COVID tests, and, you're just trying to keep him calm, and obviously he's like 1, right? So you're just like, don't touch anything, but he's not going to listen to you because he's 1.
of course.
So you're freaking out trying to sanitize everything. And it's wild, man. And I mean, lo and behold, I mean, thank God it wasn't, wasn't COVID positive, and it turned out to be a case of Fifth's disease, which, isn't as serious. So that was great. But no, it's just crazy, man. So you have a mental aspect when you're in there, because you're just like, okay, well, what do I do? Like my kid's 1. What do I do if he has COVID and I get COVID and my wife gets COVID and then we're all in the hospital? Like,
yeah.
It's wild, because he's completely dependent. So it's not the type of thing where like I'm scared to get COVID. I'm just scared to get COVID, and like, what if the worst happens and I end up having to be hospitalized for like 3 weeks, and my wife as well? Like, who's going to take care of my son? So
or
messes with your head.
Yeah, for sure. If he gets sick, you don't know what the outcome of that can be too, right? And I mean, as a parent, it's all those thoughts that scare you. So
Yeah.
but it's good to hear he's healthy and well now. So that's awesome.
Yeah. No, we're pretty stoked. He's tearing it up now. Started walking, so
yeah. Well, it just yeah, but it just gets more fun from there once they start walking. Yeah.
I'm gonna start patting all the house in like styrofoam and bubble wrap.
Yeah, for sure. Hey, thanks again for doing this. I really appreciate everything you shared. Obviously sharing your story about just going through the motions of in your 20s and making tough decisions and seeing some stuff that, that led you to where you are today. So I do appreciate all of that. And again, grateful for you coming on here and sharing your story. So that was awesome.
No, it's my pleasure, man. It's I'm really, really happy you invited me to do the show. I'm pretty happy about it. So thanks again.
Yeah, no, for sure. This has been great. And I know you don't have much of a social media presence, but if people wanted to find you, what's the best way?
Best way, I would say Facebook or LinkedIn. Just my name, Jordan Larocque. Larocque with a C.
Okay, and you're not on the Instagram train yet, so.
No, I haven't gotten on the Instagram train yet, but who knows?
Okay,
2020 is still not over.
Yeah, for sure. All right, thanks again, man. It was great doing this, and hopefully you can have a listen to it later.
Yeah, fantastic. Looking forward to it, man. And it's always a pleasure.
Yeah.
Well, that's the end of the podcast. Thanks again for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. And again, please leave a review at the end of the episode. I would truly appreciate it. Until next week.